Okay, good morning, everybody. We are starting week 7 or ending week 7 today, actually, financial foundations. We've got one more week to go, actually, of classwork. Today kind of wraps up our Unit 2 materials. We're going to be talking about charitable giving and some record keeping things to think about. Planning for retirement, for instance, how people go about that, what to consider. And then next week on Tuesday, will primarily be dedicated to a review of Unit 2 materials and topics before the Unit 2 test comes out the end of next week. And then the following week, after Memorial Day weekend, will be the final exam. So after next Tuesday, really that's the end of the course material itself. So you can pretty much access everything after that point online. And there wouldn't be, for the folks that have been coming in, you would not necessarily need to come into the classroom unless you have some specific questions and need some extra help. It'd be probably a week from today, because Tuesday we're going to do the test review to get ready for the Unit 2 test. And we might even have time to do a little bit of preparation for the final, because the final is going to cover everything from the whole 8 weeks. So if you did well on the first unit test, keep that information in mind. And hopefully you'll do well on the second unit test, and that'll set you up to be successful in the final also. So why give to charity? That's probably the first question to start with today. Anybody have an idea? Why give any money to charity? I don't know if you do or not. Maybe you never thought about it. Charitable giving is part of what some people will refer to as philanthropy. If you've ever heard people described as philanthropists, most of the time that refers to very rich people that their main job is giving away their money. And you see that in some very high profile divorce cases sometimes, where there's a settlement, the original business is going great, people split up things, and so then one of the people that comes out of that situation has lots of money and no real job, but they decide that they can best sort of fulfill their role in society by finding causes to support. And so that money then either becomes grant programs or low interest loans or something else to benefit specific causes. Why do charities even exist?
To help people in need.
Yeah, to help people in need. Good, thank you, Jocelyn. I appreciate that answer. Because there are a lot of situations where people don't make enough money. Number one, government is not going to be there to support them 100% necessarily. You know, most government assistance programs are not designed for long-term support or to take care of absolutely every need for an individual or for a family. A lot of it's designed to be short term. So there's gaps, and that's where charities come in. So there's a lot of different reasons to give to charity. Maybe you believe in the cause. Now, me personally, I donate a lot of things to Goodwill because I like to shop at Goodwill. It benefits me personally. I know there are people out there that can't afford to shop at Macy's or Nordstrom's or any of those, higher priced brand new retailers. I don't care about where something nice comes from. This is probably a Goodwill shirt. And it's a polo. Somebody donated it. I wouldn't have it if somebody hadn't donated it. And I probably paid $4 for it. So I also contribute to Khan Academy because they are trying to provide funding for free education. And can you imagine how many people have gotten on Khan Academy this last year during the pandemic to get help on math topics? It's skyrocketed. So they have tremendous needs. I also contribute to organizations that fight homelessness. Most homeless people are not there by choice. A lot of homeless people have mental health issues. So homelessness prevention or assistance does a lot of things. It can help people stay off the streets. It can help them with mental health issues and maybe find them a permanent place. So those are just a few quick examples of things that I care about. You're probably going to have your own list. Maybe you don't have any money or any property, any goods necessarily to donate yourself at this point in your careers or in your life, and that's perfectly fine. There will come a time, though, maybe you'll need some assistance, and you're going to be glad that somebody donated funds or property or goods to help, that are there to help you out also. So if you're looking at this screen that I've got up here, these are some statistics. The National Philanthropic Trust. These are general statistics from across the United States. In 2019, Americans gave almost $450 billion to charities. Corporate giving in 2019 increased to $21 billion. Foundation giving in 2019 also increased. I don't have 2020 statistics here, but I would be willing to bet you that all those numbers have gone up again. And the key is this fourth bullet point here. In 2019, the largest source of charitable giving came from individuals. 69% of the total amount that's given. 2 bullet points down, it tells you where people are putting their money. Majority of charitable dollars went to religious causes, followed by education, human services, grant-making foundations, and health. 2020 numbers are probably about the same, but the needs are not the same as they were in 2019. So I would speculate that human services perhaps has gotten a larger percentage. I don't know if people gave as much money because a lot of people were out of work last year because of the pandemic. It's interesting here that you see the charitable giving accounted for 2.1% of gross domestic product in 2018. So GDP, we've talked about GDP before. Gross domestic product, that's a good chunk of that comes from 2.1%. Doesn't sound like a lot in terms of percentage, but $450 billion is still a lot of money. So there's plenty of opportunity to give. And that only includes the things that have monetary value established to them. You know, because there's a lot of things that people do for charitable organizations as volunteers. Anybody familiar with Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah, I know what it is.
They build houses, right? For people that are low to moderate income.
Mhm.
Who does most of the work? Volunteers.
Mhm.
The homeowner, the prospective buyer of the home, they have to be out there working. A lot of times you'll see, you know, a business maybe will have a Habitat for Humanity Day, and they'll get all their employees to come out and help build houses, you know, a day or a week. You know, they're not getting paid for their time. So the volunteer estimate, the last one here is from 2017. 25% of US adults volunteered to help out somewhere. You know, maybe you go to a homeless shelter and help out. You know, have you ever gone to Wheeler Mission or someplace like that on Thanksgiving and help serve meals? If you want to really see how the other half lives, really encourage you to consider doing some volunteer work for a charitable organization that you are passionate about. Because, you know, Hamilton County is not like the rest of the world. There are a lot of people in need. I mean, there are people in need here in Hamilton County for sure, but it's not nearly to the extent that you see in the surrounding counties or someplace like Chicago or New York, things like that, places like that. Now, what's a charitable organization? It's a 501c3. Ever heard that expression before, 501c3? If you want to be sure that your donation is tax exempt, you need to be sure that it's a 501c3 corporation. Sometimes you can get an idea about charitable organizations if their website has them listed as a .org. But you got to dig a little deeper to know for certain if your contributions are going to be tax deductible. 501c3 refers to the Internal Revenue Service Code. That's the law that determines whether or not a business is a not-for-profit. That's the section of the IRS code that allows business organization structures to call themselves charitable organizations. That means they exist to fulfill a specific need, and they're not there to make a profit. And charitable organizations always need help. They always need money. They most of the time don't get government grants or government funding. So they might have to go to foundations for additional funding. Like, think about the United Way, all the organizations that get funding through the United Way. The Lilly Endowment is a huge and influential foundation here in central Indiana that was started by Eli Lilly and company. But we as individuals can do some things through volunteering. You know, we can speak with our wallets, or we can speak with our feet. We can get out there and do things, or or we can contribute, whether it's time or money, we're still helping the organization and hopefully doing some good things for a cause that we support. Anybody have questions or comments on that so far? Okay, the next thing I want to show you is a little bit of a video that kind of represents, in a small way, how some communities get behind charitable giving. And it's about creating greater communities. This is a few years old. You can see from the landing page here that it's about the county of Los Angeles in California. I think they have some needs in California. People, they got homeless people living in LA. Heck yeah. You know, cities that are in the warmer parts of the country that have nice climates year round have a tremendous homelessness problem. Because, you know, would you, if you had your choice, and a lot of homeless people don't, you know, you're going to live in Minneapolis and have to deal with the winters there, or you're going to live in Los Angeles and struggle, but at least you're not going to be freezing. Indianapolis is somewhere kind of in between.
Creating greater communities. The annual County of Los Angeles Charitable Giving Campaign, CGC, is a convenient and effective way to help children and families in need. Your contributions are used to deliver affordable health care to low and moderate income families, improve literacy rates among urban school children, feed the hungry, provide shelter to the homeless, and protect the environment, to name a few. Your contributions are hard at work improving the quality of life for those less fortunate. Your support of the Charitable Giving Campaign is vital. Please consider giving through Payroll Deduction to any of our campaign partners: Asian Pacific Community Fund, Brotherhood Crusade, Community Health Charities, Earthshare California, United Latino Fund, United Way of Greater Los Angeles, Variety, the Children's Charity, or any charity that is a 501c3 and provides services in Los Angeles County. You have the opportunity to help thousands of Los Angeles County residents who are in need of vital services that our fund distribution agencies provide every day. You can be the caring hero, that kind-hearted provider, that mindful individual who wants to make a difference in your community. Help us create better communities. Donate through the Charitable Giving Campaign. The fund distribution agencies reflect the cultural and ethnic diversity and the underserved areas of the county populated by low-income men, women, and children and families. Based on the county's strategic mission to enrich lives through effective and caring service, the Chief Executive Office, Office of Workplace Programs, oversees this voluntary charitable giving campaign that has raised millions of dollars from employee payroll deductions and employee support of one-time fundraising activities. Asian Pacific Community Fund, Brotherhood Crusade, Community Health Charities, Earthshare California, United Latino Fund, United Way of Greater Los Angeles, Variety, the Children's Charity, and other 501c3 organizations. We are all an extension of the caring and effective service that Los Angeles County departments already provide. We are your partners, and together with your support, we will create greater communities.
So right there in that video, you heard him talk about 501c3, payroll deduction for contributions, a lot of things like that, that obviously that is targeted towards employees in that particular area. Most companies are going to have some type of contribution arrangement like that, especially governmental, because I think people in the public sector, in the government, everybody recognizes, but the public sector is especially motivated to make sure that the not-for-profit sector has what it needs to do well. Because if somebody doesn't do it, if the not-for-profit sector can't help, who's going to fall back to most of the time? It's going to come back on government shoulders to take care of people like in those situations. You know, we talked before about investing, how that fits into a budget. Charitable giving perhaps ought to be part of your budget also, especially if you're thinking about it for the long term. So how do you make your money go farther, do more? Something called impact investing. One possibility.
What does that actually mean?
Impact investing is a very simple idea. It's the simple idea that an investment can not only seek financial returns, as most investments do, but also seek to solve social and environmental problems. That is either a really obvious idea or it's an incredibly radical idea. It's obvious because many of us know that when we make investments in healthcare or in education or in low-income housing, those investments can help address social problems. But it's also a radical idea because many people still cling to the belief that the only purpose of investing should be to make money. And that if we want to solve social problems, we should just use charity and we should just be giving our money away. Impact investing is a new idea for those people because it really pushes forward the idea that investing can be, alongside government and philanthropy, a tool we can use to solve social problems.
We're talking about companies that actually, through their goods and services, are providing some sort of social good. It's not this old model of we make a lot of money, we give a little bit to good causes, and we tell the world about that because that makes us look good. It's something different than that.
Right. So it's that and more. It's basically saying that we shouldn't be limited to grants as the key tool that we use, but rather one of a number of tools that could include below market rate loans, investments into higher risk areas that a traditional market rate investor might not explore, and a whole host of areas of engagement with organizations that are nonprofit or for-profit, but are really about impact.
Unlike a company like Ben & Jerry's that produce a product and then use some of those profits to support communities, impact investors are looking at companies that are, through the company itself and the products that they sell and the customers they sell to, are addressing social problems. So for instance, it's investors who are lending to private schools that are very affordable in the slums of India that are helping to close the educational gap. Or it's investors who are giving loans to farmers in rural Africa who take those loans and allow them to participate in much more lucrative international export opportunities versus local opportunities.
In the space of impact investing and social entrepreneurship and all the areas that you've come across, what is actually working right now? And what should we all be a little bit skeptical of?
In the book, we talk about one of the problems in the sector of premature celebrationitis.
Sure.
We tend to get very excited about announcements of new ideas and don't necessarily follow up and look at what actually worked. And I think, to your point, not to get too technical, but the idea that somehow impact investing can replace government or replace charity, when you look down at the deal-by-deal basis, proves to be a little bit false. In reality, some of the most exciting deals that are both generating substantial social impact and also making money for investors are one in which the investors and the entrepreneurs work in very interesting ways alongside government and philanthropy. So I think one thing that works, and we see this time and again, is when the impact investors and the social entrepreneurs recognize that they don't exist outside of government systems and other philanthropic systems, but are able to harness them together.
Let's say I'm a newly minted millionaire, multimillionaire, billionaire, and I'm just starting to think about giving away my money, making some sort of impact in the world. what would you say to me? I don't want to just write a check to some organization. I want to use the same business principles that I use to accumulate my wealth to create some kind of an impact. What would be my first step?
Well, I think the first step is to really re-engage with those things about which you're most passionate, whether it's the environment or arts or education or any of these areas. And then to understand, as you're thinking about what to do in that area, that the tools that you have available to advance the interests of that theme, if you will, really go well beyond what you could do on a charitable basis. And so maybe your first step would be to do as Bill Gates did and simply spend a year or two learning about what the real critical issues are in that space, what the current practices are, and to do that through the lens of impact, and to be looking for what are those opportunities where you could perhaps leverage more of a free enterprise market orientation to the solution, in addition to what you may decide to do on a charitable basis.
That sounds pretty radical. It's not going to be the case for most of us. We don't have those kind of funds available. But it does give you an idea about ways that people can be involved. Maybe someday you'll be in that situation where you can create a company that actually is actively working on solving some social problem, because that's what most of these charities are doing. They're working on some social problem that government itself can't solve, or it doesn't make sense from a profit standpoint for a for-profit company to take on. That's a huge challenge for any society, and we're no different than that. So if you're looking at charities, you're thinking about being involved or giving, whether it's your time or your money or household goods or clothing or whatever. Here's a suggested way to go about looking at ones that you want to be involved in. Now, if you're going to be looking at what charities or what causes to be involved in, the impact investing people said, look at the things that you're passionate about. There's plenty of information out there about all kinds of charities. Idealist.org, volunteermatch.org, giveback.org, smartgivers.org, justgiving.com. That one would make me a little bit nervous just by looking at the website address, because it's a .com. Most .coms are for-profit entities. So if you're just trying to organize your thoughts, this might be one way to do it. What are your what are your charitable interests? What causes are you passionate about? When I told you the things that I tend to support, I want to support, eradicating homelessness. I want to support free education wherever possible. So what are the things that you think are important? And it's not just about you necessarily, but it could be about helping out somebody or that you've experienced in your own life, and maybe you want to help somebody else to prevent that from happening to them. So what are your charitable interests? That's where your passions that's where your passions would go. And you're going to have to figure out what possible charities are out there that try to address that kind of thing. And even among those possible charities, then that third column, why those not-for-profits are of interest to you. Why pick one over another? And the second part of that says evaluating credibility. Okay. So if you've identified a charity you want to support, what does their about page tell you? You know, find out what you can about the organization. Tax number. It's a legitimate organization if it has an IRS tax number, especially if they say that they are a 501c3. Contact information. They better have some email addresses in there for staff. They better have phone numbers. If all they have is a PO box, a post office box, I would be a little bit nervous about that because you know, could be a little shady if they don't actually tell you their address, you know, where their offices are physically located. You can do a review, of course, on these not-for-profits, just like any other business these days. Reviews are everywhere on the internet. So that ought to be part of your research. You know, there are some not-for-profits where a huge proportion of their funds go to administrative expenses. They don't actually help the people that they say they're going to help. Well, they do, but it's a very small percentage. So would you rather give funds to a not-for-profit that gives 80% of their money to homelessness, or uses 80% of their money to support their staff and only 20% of their money actually goes to help deal with homelessness? That's the kind of thing that you can find out on the internet. Somebody out there has that information. You know, and what have they done? What are their accomplishments? Are they a brand new? Have they been around for a while? It's kind of like doing a job search. If you're thinking about supporting a company, supporting a not-for-profit, what's their history? Are they being honest with you about everything that they've done? Or are they posing as a charity just to try to get your money? And there are organizations out there that do that. A lot of them do telephone solicitations. So just be cautious. You know, one of the areas that seems to have a lot of those kind of pseudo charities involves support for law enforcement. There are people out there that create these entities that aren't even not-for-profits, but yet they claim to support various aspects of law enforcement. You know, it's the same as those scams we were talking about the other day. If somebody calls you up and says they've got a good deal for you, or they want to offer you something in exchange for your donation, I think I would probably check it out before I gave anybody a credit card number over the phone, especially if I did not initiate the call. You know, they called me, I'm automatically skeptical. I'm not going to agree to anything in that first contact. I don't know if you guys have ever had any experience with those kind of solicitations, but it's just something to watch out for. Questions or comments? Okay, so far, this sounds like something that most people probably aren't able to do themselves, especially if you're struggling. You know, if you're worried about putting food on the table, it's going to be hard to think about charitable giving. But this next video is a story about a teenager who decided, they saw a cause, they saw a need, and they decided to try to do something about it. I think it's a very interesting story. Maybe you can relate to it. Let's hope that video is still there. Mhm. Well, it does not look like that video is going to play, but you can get an idea right from the headline here from CNN Heroes. Yeah, this is 11 years ago, so it's probably been, the video itself is not available. Teen turns escape from pain into charity. It's a young woman who had a knee problem and was in tremendous pain. So she discovered that reading books could help her alleviate the pain. At least then she wasn't thinking about it so much. So they figured out that she had this thing called reflex sympathetic dystrophy. Complex regional pain syndrome causes the nerves and blood vessels in the affected area to tell the brain that the injury is still there. Even if it's not, the brain thinks that it is. So trying to activate her brain was one thing that she did. She started going around asking people to donate books. She heard that a nearby children's center had just built a library. So she started collecting books that people would donate, thinking, well, if there are kids there that are in the same kind of pain as I was, maybe helping them equip their library with books to read will help them deal with the pain that they're in. So you don't have to be rich and famous to be able to be involved in charitable giving. This was a person, young woman, who had her own situation and decided to try to help others as a result of her own experience. She wanted to donate 300 books, but practically in no time, she had 3,000 books. Okay. So a lot of people are willing to help out if you just ask them. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit from charitable giving, which, really is something that could be or should be a part of anybody's financial planning. We've talked about budgeting. You probably need to have a category in your budget for charitable giving. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of money. Every little bit helps, regardless of the cause. But long term, in order to prevent yourself from necessarily having these charitable needs, you need to be thinking about your own goals long term. Retirement probably being most people's number one long-term goal. After if you've had kids, then you're probably going to make sure that their schooling is taken care of first, or you'd like to be able to do that. But once the kids are grown and they're out on their own, then it comes back to what sort of life are you going to live long term? So investing and saving become a huge deal. We've already done some exercises where you have to calculate interest earnings, right? If you have a savings account, you want to invest in something that's going to give you a relatively high rate of return. Talked before about some mutual funds. It's another type of investment. You can have there are lots of different types of mutual funds out there, each with their own level of risk and their own specialty. So if you look at this list right here, balance fund, global bond fund, global stock fund, growth fund, income fund, industry fund, municipal bond fund, regional stock fund. Any of those jump out at you as being kind of risky? I would think perhaps global stock fund could be a risky one, because now you're talking about international companies. Might be hard to get information on some of those companies. The flip side of that, probably the most secure type of mutual fund is going to be this municipal bond fund. Cities, counties, they issue bonds to build roads or to build a library or a jail or a wastewater treatment plant. You know you're going to get paid off eventually, but those are long-term payoffs, 30 years a lot of times on those municipal bonds. So you're in it for the long haul if you're going to be into that kind of municipal bond fund. But you're probably not going to lose any money. You may not make a lot of money, but you're likely not going to lose any money either. So there's a lot of different things that you can consider for investing for the long term. Some things that you should just know about, just in general. First few questions on here are true, false. Pretty obvious, I think, what some of these are. That first one, a certificate of deposit must be held for a set amount of time, such as 6 months or a year. Is that true? Yes, it is. What about number 3? A share of stock represents ownership in a company. Well, of course it is. Remember the guy with the oil drum manufacturing company? That whole video was about creating a stock sale and going public and getting listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Number 5, treasury bonds are a safer investment than real estate. Is that true? Who issues the treasury bonds? Well, the U.S. Treasury. Is the U.S. Treasury going anywhere? No. Very, very safe. Real estate's volatile. You can lose a lot of money in real estate if you buy the wrong property at the wrong price in the wrong location, but you can also make a lot of money. So these are some things that you really should be thinking about for your long-term planning. Questions, comments, anybody? Okay, so you've got a budget. You've considered some charitable giving. You're thinking about your investments. How are you going to keep track of the information? Well, this particular handout suggests you need to have a record-keeping plan of some sort. Are you just going to come home and throw all your receipts in a shoebox on the corner of your desk? That's probably not a plan. That's a place that you could have to dig through to find something, find a record of some expense. Are you going to go totally electronic? You could do that nowadays. You could do all your record keeping online. Anybody know of any financial management software or apps that are out there these days for individuals to use? Have you ever heard of QuickBooks? Quicken? What about Mint.com? Well, those are just two examples of apps you can get on your phone. and can do all your record keeping for you. The part of this record keeping plan, though, is also not just for you. Okay, so let's say that you're married. What has often happened, maybe not often anymore, but what used to happen a lot when the man was the sole breadwinner in the family, you know, one income, they took care of all the expenses, they did all the payments, they took care of all the records. What happened for the woman in that situation if the man died? Well, she might not have any idea about how the finances were taken care of. That's less of a problem nowadays, usually when you have two income households. But your record keeping plan, especially if you have a partner or a spouse, needs to be something that both people understand and can have access to. You know, if you're incapacitated, you have a stroke, you don't even have to die, but you can be debilitated from physical things that affect your ability for moving, around, for thinking, for communicating. You know, what happens with stroke victims a lot of times is they can't hardly talk. So your record keeping plan has got to be something that you've got information about, that it can be shared with someone that you trust. For most of us, that's going to be a spouse or a partner. You know, do you have a contact person at your local bank that you work with? Okay, it needs to be in your records somewhere. You know, where are you going to keep certain records? Pay stubs. Where are you going to keep your pay stubs and your W-2 forms? Well, the W-2 is what you need to file your taxes every year. A lot of companies don't send those out in paper anymore. They're electronic. So again, right there is one place where you could start to keep electronic records. Bank statements the same way. You don't need to get the paper bank statements. The banks would prefer that you use their online services. You got other accounts, you know, phone, car insurance, virtually everything that 20 years ago would have had to have been kept on paper, you can do online or through an app these days. I love all that kind of stuff. And the second page of this gives you some of those examples. The first two I mentioned, Quicken and Mint.com. QuickBooks is also used by a lot of people for small business financial management. So that sort of software could have a dual purpose for you, not only managing your personal finances, but could help you keep your business organized as well. And look in the last line here in number 6, compare your spending to your budget and adjust your budget as needed. And a couple times a year, you might need to make some budget adjustments, depending on how your investments are doing or how your spending is doing. So having any kind of plan is better than no plan. So if you're really thinking long term, now you're thinking about what your retirement's going to look like. What are you going to do when you're done working? You know, maybe that's the time where you start to do more volunteer work. You have time available so that you can go support some of those causes. This particular handout here has a really good summary of different types of investments. So it's a good idea to get educated about these things. You know, you can have all kinds of different strategies for investing for the long term for your retirement. You can have a blend of different strategies. A big factor should be this third column here, the one right in the middle. How much risk can you tolerate? Are you a gambler? You're okay with high risk. Okay. If you're more conservative, you want low risk. The pros and cons of each of these are listed here. So you can tell, like for bonds, very stable, more stable than stocks. Bonds typically are issued by governmental entities. The government's not going anywhere. Stocks, though, companies go bankrupt all the time. So stocks have got a little bit more risk, but you're not going to get as much a return on those kind of investments. Mutual funds, now you're sharing the risk with other people that are putting their money in to invest in various things. A lot of times the mutual funds are very diversified. That could be a good thing to minimize your risk. No guarantee on the return, though. It's one of the big things about bonds is that they pretty much will tell you what to expect long term. Stocks, you know, we did quite a bit. We did a whole day on the stock market. The market is quite volatile. Most people don't have time to individually manage their stock funds if they're invested in the stock market. So a lot of times they're going to rely on a stock broker. Perfectly fine. And even within that, you need to be able to tell your stockbroker, you know, this is a long-term investment, or here's a portion that I feel more comfortable risking. You know, let's go for some high growth stocks on certain amount of money, and then the rest needs to be conservatively invested for the long term. When we were doing the interest calculations that we did before, we mainly talked about simple interest. This page also shows you how to calculate compound interest. Compound interest is always a better deal because then the interest is added back into the account and then you earn interest on the interest. And that can really add up over time if you have a large amount invested. So you even with $100 here over 6 years, you can see that you're going to earn a few more dollars in 6 years if you do the compounding. Interest compounded daily is a phrase that you hear quite often through banking circles. So here's a couple of examples. John receives $1,000 as a graduation gift from his grandparents. Rather than spend it, he decides to invest it in a 2-year bond that earns 3% simple interest. John doesn't need access to the money right away because he wants to save it for when he's ready to buy a home in 10 years. Is that a wise investment for John? It's the kind of question that you're going to have to face too when you get ready to make investments. John doesn't need the money. He's thinking fairly long term, 10 years he wants to buy a home. 3% interest isn't a whole lot, but it's still better than nothing. It's better than putting the money in a jar in your backyard. But that's essentially the question that every investor has to consider, no matter what their long-term goals are. You're going to be an investor too, and really the most important investment that you can make is in yourself, right? Okay, so the last thing I'm going to look at here is a little short video about some of the top charities in the world. You've probably heard of some of them. If you've never thought about charitable giving, then maybe this will be kind of an introduction so that you can have some exposure and maybe think about supporting some of these in the future.
So YouTube, in this video, we're going to be talking about the 8 most effective charities in the world today, according to GiveWell.org. GiveWell is a nonprofit organization that evaluates charities based on their effectiveness, track record, transparency, and room for additional funding. Most importantly, they look for charities that are proven to make a massive change in the quality of people's lives. So your donation is guaranteed to make a big difference. Want to drastically change or even save lives? Then these are the charities for you. I'll leave links in the description below if you'd like to find out more about any of these organizations, including how you can donate to them in the future. Also, please know that every single dollar this video earns will be donated to one of the charities on this list. So if you'd like to help out for free, simply spread this video around. Okay, starting off in no particular order, at number 1 we have the Malaria Consortium. The Malaria Consortium primarily works on preventing, controlling, and treating malaria in 12 countries across sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia. In 2016, there were 216 million cases of malaria worldwide, resulting in about 445,000 deaths, mostly among children under the age of 5. And while these numbers may seem insurmountable, the good news is that the Malaria Consortium can provide someone with 4 months of seasonal malaria treatment for only $6.93. At number 2, Evidence Action's Deworm the World Initiative. While virtually unheard of in developed countries today, parasitic worm infections are endemic in many of the poorest countries in the world. They interfere with nutrient uptake, which can lead to anemia, malnourishment, and impaired physical and mental development. In fact, infected children are often too sick and tired to concentrate at school or to even attend at all, and more than 836 million children live in areas that leave them at risk of infection. Fortunately, these worms can be eradicated at a very low cost, as little as 40 cents per child, depending on the location. The Deworm the World Initiative works with government-run, school-based programs in order to provide and distribute drugs that quickly kill these parasites. The next charity, at number 3, is Helen Keller International, specifically their Vitamin A program. Helen Keller International works to reduce malnutrition, blindness, and poor vision caused by vitamin A deficiency in sub-Saharan Africa. Randomized controlled trials have shown that supplementing with vitamin A can have a profound impact on child mortality rates, as well as many other health issues, all at the cost of only $1.35 per person. At number 4, we have the gold standard, the Against Malaria Foundation. This charity has been on GiveWell's list of top charities since 2012, and here's why. The AMF provides bed nets treated with insecticide for people at risk of contracting malaria. These nets prevent mosquitoes from biting people while they sleep, drastically reducing the spread of malaria. Purchasing and distributing one large, family-sized net costs only about $2 or $3, and it's been estimated that for every $3,500 donated to this charity, 1 life will be saved, while many more will be spared severe illness due to contracting malaria. Number 5, the Schistosomiasis Control Initiative. This charity works with governments in sub-Saharan Africa and Yemen to create or scale up programs that treat schistosomiasis, a disease caused by a parasitic flatworm that spreads through drinking water. Up to 200,000 people die each year from this disease, and it affects an estimated 250 million people worldwide. But once again, there is some good news, as treatment for this disease is relatively inexpensive, costing about 99 cents per person. Our number 6 charity is called Sight Savers. Sight Savers works to prevent avoidable blindness and support those with impaired vision in low and middle income countries. GiveWell, however, focuses on their efforts to treat neglected tropical diseases, specifically their deworming program. Certain parasitic worms can affect one's vision, and Sight Savers has committed to treating these infections as well. Having established a presence in more than 30 countries, they are uniquely positioned to distribute treatments, which cost around 95 cents per person. At number 7, we have the End Fund. The End Fund manages grants, provides technical assistance, and raises funding for controlling and eliminating neglected tropical diseases. Like the 2 previous charities on the list, GiveWell has focused on their deworming initiative and found it to be very effective. At just 81 cents per treatment, the End Fund can provide massive benefits at a very low cost. And finally, at number 8, we have Give Directly. Give Directly is unlike any other charity on this list because they don't fight disease per se, but poverty itself. Using payment services linked via mobile phone, Give Directly allows donors to make direct cash transfers to extremely low-income households in countries such as Kenya and Uganda. Research has shown that direct cash transfers have a profound impact on earnings, food security, mental health, and can even reduce rates of domestic violence. Okay, that's it for our list. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like more information, check the links in the description. And if you haven't already, please subscribe below.
Well, there you heard a bunch of different situations where worldwide problems can and are being fought by charitable organizations. So that's what we got for today. So if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, hopefully we'll see everybody on Tuesday, and we'll work on getting ready for this Unit 2 test. That'll be the end of next week. See everybody later.